Hey everyone, Dan with Mac Rumors, and in this video we're going to compare the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus dual cameras to the iPhone Xs. The Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus finally brought over its dual camera setup that was introduced last year on the Note 8, but added a few upgrades and some new features. This year, Samsung switched its cameras from a horizontal to a vertical position with a 12-megapixel f1.5 to 2.4 variable aperture in its main camera and a secondary 12-megapixel f2.4 telephoto lens. The variable aperture feature is new to the S9 Plus, which will switch the main camera lens from an f-stop of 1.5 to 2.4 on the fly based on lighting conditions for your shots. So in auto mode, the camera will handle all of this for you, but if you'd like to choose your f-stop manually, you can do so by using the camera's Pro mode. In terms of video, the S9 Plus is capable of taking 4K video at 60 frames per second and 1080 at 240 frames per second, which is the same as the iPhone X, but the S9 Plus also implemented a new super slow motion feature, which will record in 720p at 960 frames per second. When you launch the camera app, which you can easily do so by double-clicking the power button, you'll notice all of the different modes at the top of the screen. You can swipe through some modes like Food, Panorama, Pro, Live Focus, Auto, Super Slow-Mo, AR Emoji, and Hyperlapse. Now for this video, I only focus on a couple of these modes. Most of the pictures were taken in auto, which is primarily what most average consumers shoot in. They just want to take their phones out and snap the best photo they can quickly. We will also take a look at Live Focus, which is similar to Apple's portrait mode, and we'll also take a brief look at the super cool 960 frames per second super slow motion settings. With both phones, I went in each camera's settings and changed them to only ensure that each camera was set to its highest quality settings. With that said, here are some photos from each camera taken in auto mode. Nothing was altered or edited, these photos were just quickly snapped in random lighting conditions. Now it's pretty clear that each phone is capable of taking some pretty great pictures. However, the variable aperture feature on the S9 Plus, especially in low light, is really good. As you can see in these sunset pictures, the pictures are much more crisp and have great definition. This is evident when looking at the water in each of these photos. The iPhone X, however, does a much better job at accurately portraying the colors in the sunset itself. I prefer the photos straight out of the camera, auto mode, no editing from the S9 Plus, over the iPhone X, but I'd say that the difference to most people is probably not as significant or noticeable. Our next category is portrait or live focus mode, and this was a little easier to decide a winner, but it was still pretty close overall. Whenever I took a photo in portrait mode on the iPhone X, more often than not, the camera had a hard time figuring out the edges or corners of the subject, which means you'll get portions of the subject blurred where it shouldn't, like within the corners of this sign in this picture. The S9 Plus does a pretty good job at this overall, but it's not perfect. Now, I have had photos on the iPhone X look nearly perfect, like the picture of this log. When the iPhone X gets it right, it looks really good, but getting it correct is kind of the hard part. If you want to edit the amount of background blur, you can do so on the S9 Plus by tapping the Adjust Background Blur setting and then using the slider to increase or decrease the blur amount. Now the picture automatically defaults to somewhere in the middle, which I personally think is perfect, but if you increase the blur too much, things can get a little weird looking, so try not to overdo it. On the iPhone X, the only real editing that's specific to a portrait mode photo is the ability to adjust the portrait lighting, but background blur is not something that you can adjust. I'll have to give the edge to the S9 Plus again, as getting the background blurred properly is more important to me, and the S9 Plus has done a better job over the iPhone X. Finally, we have the video category, and more specifically, super slow motion. Now this category might not be fair because the iPhone X can't record at 960 frames per second, and this feature is probably a novelty to most, but it's still pretty cool. The easiest way for me to show this off was to pour out some water and hopefully show you the difference between what the iPhone can capture at 240 frames per second compared to the S9 Plus and the 960 frames per second. Again, it's kind of a tough comparison since one can capture at 960 frames and the other one can't, so I will leave this part as kind of a draw, but it's nice that Samsung included this feature for those who might want to use it. 4K video looks pretty good for both phones, and when you're not moving around, stabilization is great when recording handheld. The real trick here is stabilization while walking, and the S9 Plus did a much better job in my opinion at keeping things stable and avoiding those jittery overcorrections. Side note, it was really windy during this shot, and I'll spare your ears the pain, but I guess it's worth mentioning that the iPhone X has a much better microphone at suppressing the wind as opposed to the S9 Plus. Bonus category, both phones offer a new take on emojis. The iPhone X has Animoji, and the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus has AR Emoji. Now this video was really only going to focus on the main dual camera setups that are on the back of each phone, but since these features are so popular, I wanted to briefly mention them. Animoji has way more technology behind it and is a lot better than Samsung's AR emoji. There are definitely more features out of the box with Samsung, which is cool, but in terms of functionality, the iPhone X is flat out way better. We actually did a full video about this subject a couple of days ago, and I'll leave that video linked in the video description below. Overall, both phones sport some really awesome cameras. If you use your camera in auto mode 98% of the time and just want your phone to take a great photo when you need it, both phones are going to do that with no problem. If you really need the best camera in your smartphone and you really take the time to learn the features and its capabilities that both phones can offer, then the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus might be the right choice for you. In my opinion, the cameras just flat out do a better job over the iPhone X, and there's just a lot more that you can do, especially with the Pro Mode feature. So let us know in the comment section down below what you think the best camera is, and also be sure to let us know if there are any other comparison videos that you'd like to see between the S9 Plus and the iPhone X on the channel in the future. This has been Dan with Mac Rumors. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.